Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another edition of The Democratic View. And my name is Phyllis Italiano, and I am the hostess. And today I have with me a gal born and bred in upstate New York. Her name is Allison Branco, and she works for the Peconic
Estuary program.
Estuary program. Well, I wonder if you can first define what an estuary is.
Sure. An estuary is where freshwater and saltwater come together. So bays and harbors, most of our coastal water bodies on the East Coast are estuaries.
You know, when you go over the Tappan Zee Bridge
Yeah.
and the Hudson River,
That's an
you
estuary
can see
too.
it. You can see them going like
Yeah.
this, the two, one going down and the other one going up.
Yeah, and they mix.
And they mix.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's an amazing sight,
It
you
is.
know. Of course, you could fall off the Tappan Zee Bridge doing it. But,
Can't look too close.
but, you know. So you are from, tell us where you're from. What's the name of the town in upstate New York?
Loudonville.
Loudonville.
Yes, a suburb right outside of Albany.
A suburb of Albany. Did you go to Albany? Was that your place where you hung out as a kid?
No.
No?
We never really went into the city very often, and not until high school, certainly, except to go to the museum.
And you went to what colleges?
I went to Connecticut College as an undergraduate in New London, Connecticut, and then the University of Connecticut for grad school.
And what were your majors as an undergraduate and as a graduate?
I have a bachelor's degree in zoology and a PhD in oceanography.
In oceanography.
Oceanography.
Wow, were you watching the things about the Arctic Ocean when they were trying to find that plane?
Oh, yeah.
And seeing all the debris?
Yeah. It's
Yeah.
fascinating stuff, all the different things they can use to look down into the water.
Yes.
It's really fascinating.
Yes, it was, wasn't it? And how the water swirled in the Arctic Ocean. I don't know what that was called, but there was a term for it.
A gyre, probably.
I don't remember it, but I guess I'll take your word for it, since you have a PhD in oceanography, and I only have 2 master's degrees. Tell us about what it is that you are representing. What's the Peconic Estuary Institute?
Program
means.
So the Peconic Estuary program is a partnership, really, of federal, state, and local governments, along with scientists and citizens. So its function is really to manage for water quality and habitat protection based on natural boundaries rather than political boundaries. So since the water and the pollution don't really obey our municipal boundaries, the idea is to bring together everyone with a stake in the Peconic Estuary and the watershed that impacts it to sort of cooperate and work together to manage for protecting and restoring water quality.
So when you talk about the Peconic Estuary, we're talking about what bodies of water besides Peconic?
We're talking about really everything between the forks of Long Island. We draw lines sort of from Orient to Montauk and everything inside there in between the forks, and all of the land that drains into the estuary too. So the watershed begins all the way up at the Brookhaven National Lab and sort of follows the high point of both forks out, and so everything sort of drains into the bay. So all the bays, Great Peconic, Little Peconic, Flanders, past Shelter Island, Gardiner's Bay, all of that is part of the Peconic Estuary.
Yeah, you mentioned my favorite word.
Which?
Gardiner's Bay.
Gardiner's Bay.
As a matter of fact, yesterday, even though it's quite cold today, yesterday I got home from my class from Sag Harbor and drove by the beach where I swim at Maidstone Park, and got out and walked down to the water. Well, the beach was so warm, and I put my hand in the water. The water wasn't so bad.
No?
You could have laid on the beach yesterday. It was that lovely.
Oh, yeah.
So I ran home and got in my bathing suit and went to my private little place where I go off-season when the water's starting to get cold, to go in the water. I had my bathing cap, my earplugs, my towel. I was all ready to go in the water. I went up to my ankles.
A little chilly?
Little chilly.
Yeah.
I
Still
was
pretty
like
cold.
an ice bath.
Yeah, it's been a
said,
crazy
well,
winter.
I ain't doing this.
No.
You know, well,
No
I have
way.
usually been in the water by the beginning of
Yeah.
April,
But this year, it's not warming up as fast as usual.
well, I'm glad to know that Peconic Bay is that Gardiner's Bay is part of it. Although
It
I
is,
always
yeah.
say Gardiner's Bay is in pretty good shape.
It is, because it gets really well flushed with
Yes.
deep ocean water. So it's in better shape, I think, than the rest of the estuary.
Yeah. And the Peconic Bay, how is that?
They're all in relatively good shape compared to, some of our neighbors, Jamaica Bay or, the Hudson River. We're really pretty lucky compared to some of our neighbors, but it's not great. And in the Western Estuary, we do have a lot of water quality problems, and the whole thing is really under a lot of pressure. And, it will not be great forever unless we can do a better job.
So what is it that are the goals of your group?
So our mission is to both protect and restore both the water quality and habitat quality of the Peconic Estuary. So places where the water quality is good, to keep it that way, and places where it's not, to help bring it back to how it once was.
How do you restore? I've often said I went to Fire Island as a young girl, and in the 60s, the scallops used to, even where the boat was docked in Fair Harbor, used to dance across the water.
Yeah.
And it was an amazing sight. And then it disappeared.
The
in
Peconic used to be that way
80s.
too, yeah, that's right.
And it's really was devastating to lose that. As a matter of fact, I remember getting a bushel one time. We got a bushel of scallops, and I think out of the bushel of scallops, we got about a pound of the bay, scallops. But they were the most delicious thing in the whole world.
Yeah, they are.
And how do you have to? What do you do? What are the steps one does to restore after something like brown tide?
So there are a few things. The first thing you have to do is fix the problem that's causing all that in the first place, which isn't no trivial matter. It's hard to really know exactly, especially in the case of brown tide and other harmful algal blooms. We know that nitrogen loading to the bay is one really important factor, but there may be others, climate and other things. So first there's research that needs to be done to really pin down the mechanisms that cause these problems. Then also we need to remove the problem, or at least reduce the problem. And so we're working really hard, particularly in terms of nitrogen loading, to reduce the amount of nitrogen loading to the bay. There's a mechanism called the TMDL, which is basically a diet, a pollution diet, you could call it, for the bay. Sort of lays out how much nitrogen the ecosystem can handle. Just like a doctor would tell you, you can only have 1,600 calories a day. You could say the bay can handle this many kilograms of nitrogen a year. And so that was done several years ago, and we have a goal to work toward now. There are dramatic decreases in the loading of nutrients to the bay that need to happen to meet that diet.
They always talk about nitrogen loading and
Yep.
nitrogen, and I don't think that most people realize exactly what nitrogen and nitrogenous waste is.
Right.
It's your urine.
Yes,
And
it's a lot of
it's-
things, but the
but
biggest
clean
factor,
is it.
yeah, the
Yeah.
wastewater is the biggest one. Also,
Yes.
it comes from fertilizer,
Oh, yes. Yes,
both
indeed.
on farms and on homes, but
Yes.
and some comes from the atmosphere even. But the biggest factor, certainly in the Peconic Estuary, is wastewater, because we're all on septic systems, and a lot of us still on cesspools.
Yes, yes, I know I am, and I'm waiting. I'm waiting for Suffolk County to come out with some program that will allow me to get a nitrogen-fixing type of septic system. Because I know people on my block have put in new septic systems.
Yeah.
But they're not going to do anything except maybe be better and a little bit more up to date. But they're not what we really need.
That's right. Traditional septic systems really aren't designed to remove nitrogen. That's never what they were
right.
designed for. So they do remove a little bit, but not very much. And so there are a lot of new technologies available now that can remove more nitrogen. And hopefully your wait is not going to be too much longer. The county has really committed to implementing at least some voluntary programs first to allow people to install some of these new alternative technologies. They're hoping to have a few of them approved by the end of the year for people to install. And they've just announced that the state is going to give $3 million to the county, and the county said they would match whatever the state was able to contribute to create a program to install some of these alternative systems all around Suffolk County. And that sounds like a lot of money, but it'll only put in a few hundred. So there's a lot more to be done, but it's a great start. We have to get some in the ground, make sure they're working, monitor them, that sort of thing. And then I think we'll see some real progress in programs to install more and more of them.
So put my name on the list.
Put your name on the list. There's no list yet, but there will be soon, I think.
I want to be one of the first 200.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because I really I'm so worried. Well, I'm very careful about what I put into my, into even any of my water. You know, I only
Good.
use products that are, you know, the biodegradable and I do a lot of cleaning with vinegar.
Vinegar is a great cleaner, yeah.
Yes.
Good.
Yeah. Vinegar newspaper does a better job on your windows,
Mm-hmm.
and it kills me when I see Windex that has a little thing on that says contains vinegar.
Yeah.
So just use vinegar.
Yeah.
And I use a lot of baking soda.
Mm-hmm.
And also, I am very careful about not putting anything like medications
Good.
and grease.
Right.
You know, grease goes into the garbage.
It does, yeah, that's
Yeah.
really important. I think people don't really realize, so not only does everything that goes into our septic systems wind up in our surface waters, but it also winds up in the aquifer, which is the water that we're drinking. So whether you have water authority water or a well, everybody is drinking the groundwater under our feet.
That's right.
And so, you
That's
know,
right. The difference between my well water and the Suffolk County Authority, whatever they call themselves, is chlorine.
Yes.
And I'll be damned if I'm showering in chlorine.
And the water authority more and more is having to spend a lot of
I know.
money and energy to filter or treat the water that they're bringing up because of all the things that we're all putting into the ground. So that's great that you're using natural cleaning products. Everyone needs to do that, especially when you have a septic system or a cesspool.
Yes, and I think you also have to be very careful about what people put into their lawns.
Yes,
For
absolutely.
instance, I know I compost, and into my garden goes the compost,
Yeah.
and I'm very careful about what it is that goes on. Well, nothing goes on my lawn, to tell you the truth.
Yeah.
You know, a little grass seed is what I put
Right.
on but other than that, I put nothing.
Yeah, we have a real lawn culture on Long Island. You know,
Yes.
people like their front yard to look like a golf course, and I think at some point we're going to have to choose whether the grass is more important than the bay, and I think most of us would not choose the front lawn. So I think the more people can understand that, and every time you roll around the fertilizer spreader, you remember what you're doing to the bays. You know, do it less often. You know, do it not at all if you can, but if you can't, do it less. Follow the directions on the bag. Don't overdo it. Don't do it when it's about to rain. Some really simple things people can do to reduce the amount of fertilizer nitrogen that leaches. Doesn't get absorbed by the grass, it's completely wasted and goes down into the aquifer, into our drinking water, and then into our bays.
Why don't you explain to people? Some people don't know what it means, the aquifer.
The aquifer. So that's the layer of water that's sort of under our feet. So from the ground that we walk on, there's a bunch of soil that has air in between the particles, and water that falls on top sort of percolates through there. But when you get to a certain depth, which varies all around, there's a saturated layer, and that's the aquifer. And wells, both private wells and the water authority or whatever water provider wells, they're pumping water from that saturated layer up and into our faucets. Most people don't really know where their water comes from. They just say it comes from the tap. But
Yes,
on Long Island especially,
Yes.
it all comes from right under your feet somewhere. And so that's the aquifer, and that's what we need to protect. And that water that is under our feet is what's providing fresh water to our rivers and creeks and bays.
Yes, a lot of people don't know a lot of things about Long Island. They don't realize that Long Island really was formed when the Ice Age ended.
Right.
And the terminal moraine that was left became Long Island.
That's exactly right, yeah.
And then, that aquifer, I mean, you ask people where the water comes from, they say, my tap.
My tap, right.
You know, which is really amazing that they don't realize that it comes from under your feet.
It comes from right under your feet, yeah.
And one of the things that's why I'm so glad Suffolk County is taking this seriously is because in Nassau County, which is all concrete, they have a really tough time with the stormwater runoff.
Absolutely. We do have some stormwater problems too in the Peconic, but not
Yes.
nearly as much because we have a lot less. So that all that concrete, we call that impervious surface. So surfaces that the water can't percolate into. And what happens then is that it runs off those hard surfaces, gathering up whatever pollutants might be, oil from cars and contaminants and paint cans and whatever it comes into contact with, straight into a pipe and straight into our surface water. So keeping that impervious surface to a minimum is really important. And that's something people can really work on in their own homes and on their own lawns. Eliminating their turf that needs fertilizer and eliminating the hard surfaces and planting native plants, things that don't need fertilizer, don't need a lot of watering, and allow that rainwater to percolate in and not run off into the storm drains. And
Yes,
the estuary program is working on a homeowner rebate program right now. So there's a pilot program right now for the watersheds around Hashimomic Pond and Reeves Bay. And if it's successful, we're hoping to expand it to a lot of other areas, giving people a small rebate for removing lawn or hard surfaces on their property and installing either a rain garden, which is designed to sort of hold on to that rain for a little while before it percolates into the ground to get even more uptake of nutrients and contaminants.
Why don't you have a class on making a rain garden? I'd love to do that.
Yeah, sometimes you can find them. We would love to hold one someday. It would be a great thing. There's a lot of great information on the internet right now that you can find about how to design a rain garden for your house. And on the Peconic Estuary Program website, there's some good links to helping to choose plants that are native and plants that are appropriate for rain gardens.
You know, I know that there's so much stuff that's online that you can do.
There is,
But you know what?
absolutely.
Let's face it, I hate to read online. I really do hate to read online. I still get the Times delivered, you know, and I still read from newspapers because reading online is a pain in the neck. You know, it really is.
It's a whole different world.
You know,
Absolutely.
but a class
That's a
of
great idea.
showing us how to do that sort of thing.
Maybe we'll have one on LTV.
Well, you know what? They have, we have this group called the Aquaponic Protection Committee. And Seal Downs, who's one of the people that has been on this show, and she did a whole wonderful series of shows. And one of them showed that if you stopped mowing, and what would happen would you be developing the natural grasses.
Right. That's right.
You know, and I've really looked around my garden and started to say, maybe there are areas that I can just stop mowing.
Right.
And just mow less of that. Because I would like to see what would happen. You know, I'd like to stake off a whole area and see what would happen on my
You
little
should absolutely do that, yeah.
my little half acre. You know,
Yeah.
I'd like to try and see what would happen if I just let it go natural.
Natural, yeah.
You know.
And a lot of things would grow, things that don't need to be fertilized or watered, things that are
But not
adapted to the
poison
natural
ivy, I
conditions. Poison ivy is a natural,
I know it
it's
is.
a native plant on
And
Long
you know
Island.
the deer eat it?
Yeah,
They eat poison
they
ivy?
do. Crazy things.
They don't eat daffodils, though. When did this program start?
The Peconic Estuary Program?
Yes.
We celebrated our 20th anniversary in 2012, so it's
You
been
did.
around a very long time. Yeah, so essentially what happened is after the big brown tides in the 80s,
Right.
really from a grassroots citizens movement, everyone very concerned saying we need to figure out what to do about this and we need to bring some resources to Long Island to help us deal with this problem. That's sort of how the Peconic Estuary Program was born. And so there's a federal program called the National Estuary Program, and the Peconic Estuary was nominated to that program and brought into it in 1992. So that means it was designated as an estuary of national significance. And so every year we get some funding from the federal government, which is then matched by local funds to work on all the protection and restoration efforts that we do.
And I think you should go around and do whole bunches of talks with people and teaching people how to do things.
We do some of that. Public education and outreach is a really important part of
Yes.
our mission, absolutely. And we spend a lot of time and energy on that.
Because I don't think people really realize that, you know, I'm going to quote our congressman, Tim Bishop, who always says, and I've interviewed him several times, and I have an interview coming up in April, that the economy is the environment, and the environment is the economy.
That's absolutely right, especially on the East End where tourism is so important.
And wait a minute, he goes on, and he says, if you don't have pristine beaches and clear water and vistas to look out over,
That's right.
they ain't going to come.
Nobody will come.
That's
No,
right.
that's right.
That's right. You know, not only will they not come, but I'll leave myself.
Yeah.
I'll be the first guy with the house on. I always say, when we can't drink the water, I'm going to have the first house for sale.
That's right.
Because much as I love it here, we are not like Westchester County where we get it from upstate
No,
and it comes
we are
from,
not.
you know, rivers and melting waters, and we can
No.
do the things I learned as a kid, aeration, sedimentation,
Yeah.
coagulation,
Right, no.
all those steps that they do for that. We
Yeah,
don't.
I mean, I think actually that's a good thing because everything that we do impacts us in our health.
That's
And so
right.
I think the connection is really there for people. You can see the degraded water quality in the bay. You can tell that you can't drink your well water anymore. You have to hook up to public water. You know, you can really see the impacts, and really everything that everyone does will have a direct impact to improve it.
And there was an algal bloom
Oh, yeah.
that was really terrible.
We've had some really, thankfully, we haven't had, knock on wood, we haven't had brown tide back in many years in the Peconic. But
Oh, God, did I hate brown
yeah,
tide.
it's nasty stuff. But we now have recurring other harmful algal blooms, some of which are actually toxic, you know,
Yes.
if you eat shellfish that are contaminated with them. So we've exchanged one problem for another, but it's still just as big a problem, and we really need to work on it. They've been increasing in frequency. They're spreading out. More and more problems with harmful algal blooms every year. Each summer is the worst summer yet. So we really need to work harder, redouble our efforts to reduce our nitrogen loading to the bays.
Well, we all have to do it. We all
we
have to
do.
do it. It can't be just the guy at the top.
Right, and it won't be free, but it's so important. We really can't afford not to do it.
Well, what was the line that you had? We can't afford.
People say that we can't afford to, for example, to install nitrogen-reducing septic systems. People say that it's too expensive, we can't afford it, but I say we can't afford not to, because we'll have no economy at all in the East End if we
That's
don't do
right.
it.
That's right. They'll all leave,
Right, yeah,
and
That's
I
right.
will lead the parade
yes.
out of here if we don't
Me
have
too,
it.
yeah.
Because, I mean, look, I moved here. I
Yeah.
moved here because I love it, and because it had this wonderful quality to it.
Most people did, or grew up here and stayed here because of that.
Yeah. Oh, well, I envy anybody who grew up here,
Yeah.
which, by the way, Tim Bishop, our congressman, did
Yes,
grow up here.
yeah.
Lucky guy, you know. And, so are you finding that you're having any success with this, that people are paying attention
We
to?
are, I think, especially recently, I think it's been so dramatic and so visible, the algal blooms in particular in the Peconic. I think people have really started to talk more about it. There's started to be a lot more press coverage about the issue, and people are starting to understand, oh, we can't just get away with operation as usual. We really need to do something different. And I think the fact that the county has really acknowledged this as the biggest problem and is really investing a ton of time and money into trying to solve this problem, I think is going to help lead the way and make some real progress on this issue, on the wastewater issue especially.
If you have ever swam in brown tide, you know that it's something we absolutely have to make sure it
Absolutely.
doesn't come
Something
back.
we do not want to keep here.
Because it is awful.
It is, yeah.
It really is such a difference. In Peconic and Great South Bay, which it really killed the industry, the Bayman's industry
did, yeah.
there. And it was, I mean, we had such shellfish in that particular bay that was absolutely incredible for the early years of my fire out. And then came the 80s, and that brown tide came in. It was very different and very difficult.
Yeah, and in the Peconic too. We had a great scallop fishery in the Peconic, which was devastated by the brown tide. And
Yes.
it's slowly starting to creep back up now, thanks to a lot of restoration efforts, but
Oh.
it's nowhere near what it once was.
Oh, we have
won't be.
we have a whole thing out in an area where this whole group of people from the Cornell
Yeah.
Cooperative Extension work on trying to reseed
That's right.
our shellfish,
Yeah.
because it's just incredible when you have it. It
Right.
really is.
And the density has gotten so low that it's not able to bounce back on its own, and that's why everyone's working so hard on restoration. But if we can keep the water clean, those restoration efforts will actually work, and they will come back.
And of course, the eelgrass is very important.
Yes,
too.
absolutely. Especially, it's a really important nursery habitat for scallops and for lots of other things, a lot of different species of finfish. And that has also been devastated by the poor water quality. The nutrient loading, it creates harmful algal blooms and also non-harmful algal blooms, all of which shade the eelgrass and make it impossible for it to grow. We've been losing it slowly but surely. We don't really have any to speak of except for in one little small bay west of Shelter Island at this point. So there's
Really?
a lot of work to be done to bring the water clarity back so that the eelgrass can come back, which will then help all of the biota come back.
So what message do you have for the people who are going to see this show, which is on 4 times a week?
My message is do everything you can on your own property to reduce the nutrient loading to the estuary. As opportunities come up to either hook up to sewers or install advanced septic treatments, take advantage of every opportunity that there is, and support our elected officials who are trying to move us in the direction of getting that job done.
And it isn't only that, it's also not only supporting them, but also informing them of what it is that you think is important.
Yeah, that's right.
I mean, if you don't tell, Thiel and Laval, who are our state representatives, and Bishop, and also our local people here in East Hampton, that these are issues that are extremely important to you, the quality of water.
Yeah, that's right. The Peconic Estuary program got started because of that sort of thing, of regular people being concerned about what they were seeing happening. And, I think that momentum has sort of faded, and what we really need is a resurgence of all of that, and citizens getting back to the point where they're demanding some action.
Yes, that's it. We have to make our voices heard.
We do, yeah. And I think once everyone understands what is happening and that there are ways to improve the situation, that's what everyone wants to do. It's just a matter of teach your neighbor what you know and encourage them to do the same things that you're doing.
Well, thank you very much for coming, Allison. I appreciate it. I know we had a little thing to get you on here, but I appreciate you coming, and keep up the good work.
Thank you.
And
Thanks
if
for
there's
having me.
anything we can ever do to help you, let us know.
Great. Thank you.
Seriously.